place the interrogation room. Seated at the table are two men, Otto Maul, whose legs and arms are shackled, and an interrogator, Lieutenant Colonel Smith W. Brookhart, who is wearing a military uniform. You're the same Otto Maul who appeared here this morning, and you understand that your statements here are made under oath?
Yes. May I make a request?
Yes.
In Landsberg, I made the request that I be confronted with Rudolf Hoss, the commandant of the Auschwitz camp, so that I may testify in front of Hoss, and Hoss may testify in front of me. I request you now that this may be granted. I would like to have Hoss testify in my presence, as I would like him to make the statements in my presence, and I can testify as to the truth.
Assuming that you are confronted by Hoss, are you going to tell the truth? Or are you going to continue to give us the same kind of a story you gave us this morning?
No. I want Hoss to come here and state just what orders he gave me, and I can say yes or no as to what is true and what is not true. Hoss should come here and say what orders he gave me, what duties I fulfilled, and in what manner I accomplished them, and then I can deny or confirm what he says.
We will conduct this interrogation in the manner that we wish, and on the basis of the subjects in which we are interested. You are to listen carefully. You are not to interrupt or make any sound whatsoever. Do you understand this?
I will remain silent, and I will listen.
You will be given the opportunity to speak at the proper time.
Please approve this request that Hoss may come here and repeat his incriminating testimony against me. It hurts me to see that he, the commandant, is running around free while I have to go around shackled to a guard.
We are not interested whatsoever in your feelings in this matter. Rudolf Hoss, commandant of the Auschwitz camp, enters the room. Are you the same Rudolf Hoss that has appeared here on numerous occasions and given testimony?
Yes.
Do you understand that the statements you make here this afternoon are under oath?
I do.
Do you know this person sitting to your right that is shackled to the guard?
Yes.
What is his name?
Otto Maul.
Where did you know him?
First at Sachsenhausen and later at Auschwitz.
What did this Otto Maul do at Sachsenhausen and then later at
In
Auschwitz?
Sachsenhausen he was a gardener, and later at Auschwitz he was used as a leader of a work detail. And later on he was used as a supervisor during the various actions.
You mean the actions whereby people were executed and later cremated?
Yes.
You told us this morning about his first assignment in 1941 when farm buildings were converted into extermination plants. Will you restate what you said about that?
At first he worked on the farm, and later I moved him into the farmhouse, which was used as a professional extermination plant.
Otto Maul, is what the witnesses just said true?
First, I was used in work in connection with the excavation of the mass graves. Hoss must know that. He is in error if he said that I worked in the buildings that the gassing was carried out. At first I was used for the excavation of the mass graves, and he must remember that. Hoss, do you remember Swanson, Blank, Ullman, and Garduck? Those were the people who worked in the buildings at the time when you alleged that I worked there and that I was working on excavations. Surely Hoss remembers that.
Is that right?
Maul is correct insofar as he says that he was first used in the excavations. That was before he was being used for the execution.
What is being said here, as I told you this morning, is that you are responsible for this operation, namely for the killing and the destruction of the bodies in the first improvised slaughterhouse.
I was responsible to see that the corpses were burned after the people were killed. I was never responsible for the actual supervision of the killing. It was always the officers or of the physicians who were present at the time. As my commandant at the time, Hoss should be able to confirm this.
What do you say about this?
As I said this morning, Maul is only partly correct. As I explained, the gas was actually thrown into the chamber by the medical personnel, and Maul was not responsible for supervising the entire process, beginning with the arrival of the transport and the burning of the corpses. He was only responsible for a part of this process, at least initially.
You did say that he was responsible for seeing that these people were exterminated.
I could have been misunderstood. What I said, or meant to say, was that Maul was responsible in the buildings of where he worked. At first to see that the people were undressed in an orderly fashion, and after they were killed to see that the bodies were disposed of in an orderly fashion. Later on, when the extensive extermination plant was completed, He was responsible for the entire plant.
Just what operations in the plant was he responsible for?
He was responsible for everything, up to and including the actual leading into the gas chambers of the people, and after that, to remove the bodies of the people.
Will you please repeat about Mole shooting people through the neck?
As I explained this morning, those that were too weak to be moved to the gas chamber, or who could not be moved for some other reason, were shot through the neck by him, or some of the other fellows around with small caliber arms.
Well, what do you say about that?
It may be possible that some of them were shot by me, but it was a comparatively small number, and I would like to know if Holtz ever saw me do it.
I told you this morning that Host said he saw you do it, and so did many others. Host, isn't that right?
Yes, it is true. I mentioned this morning that there were comparatively few killed in that manner.
You did not tell us it was a few dozen or a few hundred. That was your problem.
I cannot quote you an exact number, that is impossible. For so many years, there were many. Sometimes there were a few out of each incoming transport, and sometimes there were zero. That is why I cannot tell you the exact number.
Well, this is the first thing you have admitted. Now you are telling the truth about which you lied this morning. Are you ready to tell us the truth about your other responsibilities, about other operations?
Yes, I will tell you the truth, as long as my commandant is present. Let my commandant tell you what I did and what my duties were.
We know what Ho said. What we want to know is your story. You were asking us for the opportunity to tell your story, and that caused us to bring Ho in.
No, I asked to be interrogated in the presence of Holtz.
You told us this morning that Mole was considered the best man for exterminations because he handled the teams of prisoners and guards better than your other subordinates. Is that right?
Yes?
Mole, suppose you tell us what was your method of selection of the foremen from the capos, and just what you found to be the best method of handling the guards that are in charge of the operations after they came in.
When I was ordered to do this work, the work details had already been selected. My Oberfuhrers had already selected the capos or foremen, whatever you call them. I carried out correctly the work in all kinds of weather. I was never drunk on duty, or when I was with the prisoners. I had never mistreated any of the prisoners. I achieved good success in the work of the prisoners because I, myself, helped them with their work with my own hands. The prisoners had respect for me because I always behaved as an exemplary soldier towards them. Therefore, I was designated for any kind of difficult work that came up. May I ask Holtz to confirm this?
Is that correct?
Yes, that is what I stated this morning.
You were decorated for your work, were you not?
I received the decorations for my services. Almost all of them who served for a number of years in the whole of Germany received these decorations. I did not receive any decoration for special work like this work. I would not have wanted a decoration for this kind of work.
Why?
Because I did not look upon it as honorable work.
Did you ever protest?
Yes. I asked many times why those things had to be done, why they could not be stopped. I even asked Hoss, and he answered that he himself did not like this, but he himself had strict orders and nothing could be done about it. He, like the rest of us, suffered by this work, and none of us were really sane anymore.
Is that right, Hoss?
Yes, others also said that and already testified to that fact in the Reich.
When do you think you lost your sanity, Hoss?
I think you mean that just when your nerves started to crack. I can testify that I was not healthy in 1942. I told you about my leave in 1943. However, I had to do those things as there was no one else who would do it for us. There were strict orders and they had to be followed. Now many of the others felt as I did, and subordinate leaders came to me in the same manner as Maul did and discussed it, that they had the same feeling.
Do you think that Mole is crazy?
No.
How long do you think you've been without your sanity?
I did not mean to say that I was insane or that I have been insane. What I meant is that my nerves have cracked and have cracked repeatedly. They were bad after the accident I described in 1937. Later, they were very bad after I had an attack of typhus and I was in the hospital and was granted a leave of absence by the doctors for the conditions of my nerves. I was never declared unfit for duty on account of bad nerve or because of the so-called paragraph 51.
How many people do you estimate went through the operation which you were responsible for? How many victims?
When you use these words, you were responsible. I want to emphasize again that I do not wish to have that word applied in any way to the actual killing of the people. I was not responsible for the actual physical ending of their lives, and will not admit that, as it is not the fact.
You did not pull the trigger, but you caused someone else to do it. Is that your position?
I do not understand the question.
How many victims were exterminated from 1941 on?
I don't know the number, and I don't think I'll be able to give you any number as far as the total number of victims goes. I believe Host might know that.
The only thing we are interested in is what you have knowledge of.
When I was in charge of the excavations, as I told you about before, together with another commandant, which was confirmed by Host, today, we put between 30,000 and 40,000 people in these mass graves. It was the most terrible work that could be carried out by any human being.
Stick to the figures.
I don't know who these people were or how they got there. I only excavated the mass graves. I was responsible for burning the bodies right there.
How does that figure strike you, Hoss?
It's impossible for him to know the exact figures, but they appear to be much too small as far as I can remember today. People buried in the two big mass graves of the so-called dugouts 1 and 2 amounted to 106 or 107,000 people.
I could not complete the excavation detail, which I mentioned before. Then I got the attack of typhus.
What do you estimate was the number of bodies you handled?
It was later, they went through my crematory plant, and I would say between 40,000 and 50,000. That is the crematory where I was responsible. I was not responsible for the two large crematories, as there were two SS Corps members, Nosfield and also Voss, who were responsible for the two large cremations, and Host will remember that.
You tell us about the figures you know.
I told you the number. Maybe 50,000, possibly there were more.
Is that for all times from 1941 clear to the end?
Yes, that is from 1941 for the entire length of my service when I had anything to do with the matter.
Don't you think you are much too modest? You had the reputation of being the biggest killer in Auschwitz. The figures there run into the millions. Won't you change your answer?
That is not true. I was not the greatest killer in
The
Auschwitz.
greatest cremator.
That is not true either. The number is not right and is probably brought up by the men who want to see me be punished by death.
Also, what do you think would be the correct figures?
Mull, in my opinion, cannot possibly have any idea of the number of killings in the dugouts where he was working and responsible. At any rate, Mull's figure is far, far too low.
What figure would you attribute to most responsibility?
It is impossible for me to quote that exact or even a very rough figure, as the number of corpses that were handled by Mull. As use of the extermination plan varied at all times, I don't know how many corpses I would have to attribute to him, and how many to Nussfeld, and how many to the others.
Mull, how many women and children do you estimate were among the bodies you handled?
Men and women, there were in about equal numbers. The ratio of children to the people was about 1 child to 100 people brought in. Sometimes transports arrived without children. I would also like to say that I was not constantly working with these transports, and of course, I cannot tell you what happened during my absence when I was not there. I was away on leave of absence, etc.
We have heard that there are more children than that. Do you want to change your answer?
As I told you, it may be 1 child in 100 or maybe more. I cannot remember exactly.
What do you say to that, host?
My estimate is that 1/3 of all the victims would be men and 2/3 women and children. I'm not able to quote the exact ratio between women and children, as that varied greatly with the transportation that came in. However, I do remember that in the transport that came in from the Ukraine and Hungary, the proportion of children was particularly high.
And what year was that?
That was in 1943. It may have been earlier.
Well, yesterday you told us you had 2 installations and spoke of the furnace in which there were 12 large ovens and 2 additional 2 ovens each, making a total of 28 separate burning units. How many human beings could you cremate at one time?
2 to 3 corpses could be burned in one furnace at one time. The furnaces were built large enough for that.
Did you operate at full capacity often?
I would like to emphasize that I had no responsibility at all with the cremation of the stoves. What I was responsible for was the burning of the corpses out in the open. Corporals Nussfield and Voss were responsible for the cremation in the furnaces.
Is that right, host?
First of all, Mull is slightly wrong in regard to the figures he quoted on the furnaces. The 2 large units were made up of 5 double furnaces each, and the others of 4 double furnaces each. Now, it is true that Nussfeld and Foss were responsible for the furnace details. Each had a large and a small one, and Maul was responsible for the bodies out in the open. Now, Maul was responsible for the disposition of the ashes, but later on, I put Maul in charge of the entire cremation. That was in 1944.
Was that in the 2 months you were back at Auschwitz after you were away?
Yes, that was when I transferred back to Auschwitz.
How often were the crematoria details of prisoners exterminated?
As far as I can remember, it was twice before I left for the first time, and they were exterminated again after the action against the Hungarians was completed.
On whose orders were the prisoners exterminated?
I received the order from Eichmann, and he ordered in particular that the furnace commando should be shot every 3 months. However, I failed to comply with these orders because I didn't think they were right.
You have said that your detail was never exterminated. What do you say now?
No, that is not true. The work detail with which I worked was never exterminated, as long as I was there, and as long as I worked. As regard to the first work detail I had for the excavation of mass graves, which I had to leave because of my attack of typhus, they may have been exterminated when I returned to duty. The only thing I know of is that when I left the last work detail I worked with, it was still alive. And that is, every member of the detail was alive when I left. Sometime after a mutiny broke out in the camp, I know that the entire guard company at the camp was used to suppress this mutiny. I was not there. I was at Gleiwitz at the time. I did not know anything about this, but Hoss can tell you that.
Did you ever cremate any of your crematorium detail?
No.
You mentioned that in the killing of people in the gas chambers that it took only 1/2 minute. On what do you base that?
The gas was poured in through a small opening. About 1/2 minute after the gas was poured in, of course, I'm merely estimating the time. We never had a stopwatch to clock, and we were not interested. At any rate, after 1/2 minute, there was no more heavy sounds, no sounds at all that could be heard from the gas chamber.
What kinds of sounds were heard before that?
The people wept and screeched.
You observed this and heard all the sounds?
Yes, I had to hear this, because I was near there with my work detail. There was nothing that I could do against this, as I had no possibility of changing this in any way.
We are not interested in your opinions on that. You helped make the arrangements to put them in the gas chamber and burn them afterwards when they were killed. The only thing you failed to do personally was pour in the gas. Is that it?
I was not responsible for the preparations, as there was no special preparations. The victims were led to the gas chamber by the duty officer, and there was a work detail from the administrator. They told them to undress. There was a further detail from the proper administration, which they were responsible to collect all the valuables from the people. The whole thing happened very correctly, and in no instance was there any reason to interfere. I had no right to interfere. Always a doctor supervised the entire thing.
You recall yesterday you said you were told that if any prisoners coming off of new transports detailed to the gas chambers would escape, you would be court-martialed.
I was talking about the work detail, not about the transports.
This came at the time you were testifying about your responsibilities at the crematorium.
No, I only say as far as the work detail is concerned for which I was responsible.
We will not argue about it as the notes show otherwise. What do you say about the detail of Maul?
Maul is not looking at this the right way. It actually is true. And I've explained this before, that the officer was responsible for the entire transport. That is, he was responsible to see that all were unloaded from the transport. The doctors were responsible for the phase of work to see that the people were killed and all the bodies disposed of. It was the responsibility of the subordinate like Maul to see that the people actually got into the gas chambers under the doctors, and then to see that their bodies were burned. Now, as far as the subordinate leader was concerned, it was his responsibility to see that none of his work detail escaped, and he would be responsible to see that none got away. In the last analysis, I was responsible for the entire matter. That is, for the entire situation dealing with transports.
You told us about some of the problems of making sure that everyone was exterminated. For instance, that mothers hid their children under the clothing after they undressed. Who was the person that gathered up the children, searched them out, and put them into the gas chamber?
I think this has been slightly misunderstood. The way this thing happened is that mothers had babies with them. who would be wrapped in blankets or cloth. The people had been told they were going to take a bath, and they had no idea that they were going to be killed. It was not the idea the mothers did not want to take their children with them into the bath and left them outside. Now later on, the work detail from the administration would pick up the babies and put them into the gas chamber.
Was it Moll's responsibility to see the children were disposed of?
Yes, but it would not mean, on the other hand, that Moll would have personally have the task of picking out the babies from under the blankets. Now, I did not tell any one of the officers or non-coms that they would be responsible for any particular thing, but the entire team was responsible for the extermination. It was to be done, and all of them carried out the orders smoothly and properly.
You, Moll, said that your team respected you because you gave them a hand. Was this job of picking up small children and gassing them part of the hand you loaned them?
Possibly this was not expressed correctly by our host. I had nothing to do with the searching of the clothes because that was not my duty. As I said, the officers that had charge of the duty was, when the transport came in, was responsible for them until the moment they entered the gas chamber. I had nothing to do with that. I had never touched the babies or had anything to do with it.
Did any of your men have anything to do with that? Anyone under you?
Yes, the prisoners. They were responsible for that. They had to clean up the room after it had been cleared of people. They then take the babies and throw them into the gas chamber. There was a strict order against any SS men touching any of this property.
We are not talking about property, we are talking of people.
Such a thing only happened rarely.
Did you ever have a special operation to kill these babies, or were they thrown into the room where people were still alive and all were gassed together?
I cannot remember a case where a baby was found, but if they were found, they were thrown into the gas chamber.
How do you know?
Well, that was an order from the officer responsible for the transport, and if any children were found, they were to be disposed of like all the rest in the gas chamber.
You carried out your orders?
I emphasize again that I myself did not find any children, but if I did find any, I would have to do it too.
Did you shoot any babies through the neck like you did the other victims?
Such a thing never happened.
That is what you said about shooting other people this morning when we proved you were lying. Are you sure you were telling the truth this time? End of scene 4. Scene 5, time 2 days later. Place, a visitor's room in the prison where host is being detained. The room is empty except for a table and 2 chairs. Ingrid is seated at the table. The door opens and host enters escorted by a guard. Host is handcuffed and his legs shackled. He sits down, the guard leaves the room.
Ingrid, how are they treating you?
We're barely getting by.
Are the children well?
They ask me all the time when you'll be coming home. I don't know what to tell them.
Say what you must.
Tell me what I must say.
What do you want from me?
The truth.
The truth.
Yes, the truth.
You were there with me.
I know that, but that doesn't mean that I knew what you were doing. You made sure of that.
I wanted to protect you and the children.
Protect us from what? What do we need to be protected from?
Prisoners.
The prisoners? You were the commandant of the camp. What was there to be afraid of?
Things took place. Unpleasant things that I thought would upset you.
They're accusing you of committing the most horrible crimes. I can't believe it.
I was just doing my duty.
Doing your duty! That's all you have to say?
What else can I say? Huh? I had my orders, and I was obliged to carry them out.
But Rudolph, they're saying that you're responsible for millions of deaths. How can this be?
I answered their questions. That's all I can do.
But they may execute you.
I know. What's done is done.
How can you be so calm when you know you'll be leaving behind a widow and young children?
Many bad things happened in this war.
It doesn't help me or the children.
If I could help you, I would.
You and Hitler and your cronies were so sure Germany would win the war, and we all believed you.
Well, I have no reason to doubt the Fuhrer.
What do you think of him now?
Does that matter?
Yes, it does matter, because you're being accused of the most awful crimes. And if you thought the Fuhrer was right, well then how can you possibly explain explain yourself.
Ingrid, I did not make policy. I carried out orders.
But you can explain that you were misled or deceived, or well, then maybe they'll let you
I'm
live.
afraid that is not possible.
Why not? Why can't you say it was one big misunderstanding, that you were made to follow orders, that otherwise you would have been punished. They would have punished you, they would have punished us, if you had refused to obey.
Because it would not be the truth.
What are you saying? That you agreed to all those awful things you did?
It had nothing to do with whether I agreed. It had to do with what I was ordered to do.
They do not believe you. They're holding you responsible. You were the commandant. They know that.
And they also know that I had my orders, which I was expected to follow.
My poor deluded husband. How can you say such a thing when they're telling you that you were ordered to commit mass murder?
I did not murder anyone. In fact, during the war, I never so much as even laid a finger. Anyone, German, Russian, Jew, you, our children, anyone.
Oh, but Rudolph, they're saying that you ordered these things.
You just don't understand.
Oh, what's there not to understand?
That I was following orders, not giving them.
Rudolph, even though you tried to shield me from what was going on at the camp, I saw and I heard enough to know that you were in charge of something really big.
I was merely an administrator.
Oh, God, do you think you're fooling anyone by saying that?
I'm not looking to fool anyone. I did what I was ordered, that's all.
But you're being accused of killing women, children, even little baby infants, entire families wiped out by your guards under your command in front of your eyes.
Yes, that did happen. But they were Jews, and I was told they were the enemy.
Even little babies? They were enemies too?
Yes, I was told that and I believed it.
Are you for real? You killed little babies. What were you thinking? Were you insane? I mean, you could have talked to me.
What good would that have done?
I'm your wife. Didn't that mean anything to you? Rudolph, what is going to become of me and the children?
Have you contacted my sisters?
Oh, I tried, but they refused to speak to me. They call me a Nazi pig, whore, slut, murderer's tramp, and other awful names. I don't know who to turn to.
I don't know what to say. I just know that you are innocent.
I wish I could say the same for you.
Ingrid starts to weep as the guard enters the room. The end.